Good evening, everybody. I'm Glenn Jones from NBC 10 Boston. It's my privilege to be here to moderate this panel with the filmmakers of the two films that you just saw. You've already voiced your appreciation, so I won't ask you to do that part again. But I do expect us to have a spirited conversation not only about how these films were made, but what they hope the film's impact is beyond today. Also, we'll try to leave a little bit of time at the end for you to participate in asking some questions as well. We have a limited amount of time and a lot of voices here to speak with, so we'll try to get through this as quickly as we can. But first, let me introduce everybody. I haven't gotten the chance to meet everybody in person yet, so I'm doing this for the first time as well. Darrus Sands, who is the producer and story supervisor of Welcoming the Embrace. Darrus Sands is a filmmaker and community advocate and the co-creator of Welcoming the Embrace. His love for storytelling and community advancement creates an opportunity for rich discussion, transparency. Using both skill sets to complement the other, Darrus has written and produced thought-provoking content. He currently manages equity partnerships for the Commonwealth after many years of community engagement service at the Boston Public Health Commission and the Boston Celtics. Round of applause, please, for Darrus. Miranda Adekoje? Close enough, I'm sorry. You'll have to teach me better later. Miranda is the co-owner of Jagan Fly Productions and a founding member of Beyond Measure Productions, a Boston-based company of Black filmmakers with a track record of producing thought-provoking projects that showcase the human experience in all its fullness and breadth. Miranda is an accomplished writer for stage and screen, producer, and actress. Welcome, Miranda. Noah Christopher was born in Boston with a camera in his hand. His mother bought a vintage VHS camcorder that became the igniter of what he was born to create. After graduating university, he traveled with a fellow filmmaker around the world to shoot an award-winning short film titled 4. That trip taught him the grind of guerrilla filmmaking. He grew those teachings back home into a production company called Beyond Measure Productions, and he was the director of Welcoming the Embrace. Gregory joined Embrace Boston in November 2020 and now serves as Director of Digital Strategy and Production. He is a highly experienced cultural curator, journalist, and content creator with a career spanning over 2 decades. Gregory's outstanding contributions to the music journalism industry have earned him 5 nominations for Music Journalist of the Year at the Boston Music Awards. Right next to me here is Clennon King. He is a critically acclaimed, award-winning documentary filmmaker who spent a decade working in Boston. His most recent film, as you just saw, is The Boston Photograph. He has also created Passage at St. Augustine and Fair Game, surviving a 1960s Georgia lynching. He has been a journalist in TV news in Atlanta, Boston, Dallas, Jacksonville, Miami, and Mobile. My goodness, well traveled. Please welcome Clennon King. All right, family, let's get into it. Miranda, I wanted to start with you if I could, because I saw all the hats you wore in the production of this film, so I know you got a really wide experience. I'm curious whether you learned or discovered some things that you did not expect to learn or discover in the journey to put this together.
Thank you for the question. Thank you everyone for coming. This is incredible to watch it with our city. Yes, the answer is yes. A big part of Beyond Measure, so I am both the producer and the production manager for the piece, and I did the help with the story, but a big part of Beyond Measure really is the team that we have around us. We cannot do this work without specialized individuals who really push us and push the work. Our story producer, Austin Elise Mayfield, who's in the audience, she pushed us When we said, this is how we wanna, this is how we wanna take it, we think that this will work, she said, okay, but that was awesome. Okay, but and her questions helped us get to a place where we didn't know that we could go. So that was something that we discovered, just where the story could go. And we also had to pivot. We did have to pivot. We had an idea for this story, and then thankfully, the embrace was unveiled before we started editing. And we got to witness the national response to the monument. And at that point, we said, oh, okay, there are still ways that other people see our city that we need to, it's not even address, but we need to show who we are and all of our beauty and our complexity and our history. We need to show who we are. That needs to be our center. And so when we recentered in the post-production process, that's when the love letter kind of came out. And if I could just really quickly, could our crew just stand up and be recognized? Because none of this would be made without you. Please, Kevin, Pat, Austin, yes. Dulce, thank you all so much. Real team. DJ, Will Chanel was our narrator. So yeah, so there were a lot of discoveries to be made.
Well, let me go to Darrus, just based on what you said there, Miranda, because I'm curious, Darrus, whether the way you started the film was a result of the pivot, or if that was your intent all along.
Yeah, I think that, as Miranda shared, when we heard a lot about what was going on, how there was a response, we knew that even before, the monument was put up, there was a response, there was a reaction, and we were hearing all of these stories from all these separate places. So when we decided to figure out a way to sort of find a story that parallels this monument coming to our city, we knew that we wanted to, highlight its best features, And I think that, on a national level, there is some recognition of what a Bostonian is, and it's connected to, in a lot of ways, sports or like the revolution or things that really don't define or reflect our reality growing up in the city. So, we wanted to start this film just telling the story really plainly, like this is what you think we are, and this is who we actually are. There's so much rich culture here, there's so much to explore, and there's so much more that you're gonna witness after you see this film. So it is really like, we want to encourage folks to start digging deep into the stories and figuring out what Boston culture is from this Black perspective, and being able to celebrate it all in one.
Okay, well, let me ask Clennon then about your film. I guess maybe fill us in a little bit on your journey to create it. It's, I think, a story that maybe many people in this room had not heard before. What drove your passion to tell it?
Well, what do I do? Yeah, there we go. I started, actually, this came up by accident. I had been commissioned by Boston Magazine. I was in Georgia, I resettled in Georgia, to do a fairly granular story of the love story of Martin and Coretta. And I went for a deep dive, and all of a sudden I find this photograph. And I needed to find out what the backstory was. This photograph that was taken not in Boston Common, but in the public garden, on a particular path. And I needed to find that guy who owned the photograph. The problem was he was a black man, he had a disease, and apparently he had divorced his wife, who you saw in the film, who used to date King, and but he couldn't talk. And so they told me that the wife, the woman, his ex-wife, was still alive. And so I needed to rely upon the new wife to get a hold of the ex-wife, to get me, and then I come to find out she's not in the area, she's actually on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And so money was tight at the time, and I said, what the hell? You only live once. This woman's 91 years old. She's a time capsule of the story. Let me get on this plane and let me go. And I hired a driver who met me at the airport, and I went after it. And so my sensibility is more than anything, and I'm hoping filmmakers are hearing this. You know, I think much of Boston's story, we look to Bostonians to tell. The reality is, so much of us have been touched by Boston. Why? Because you guys are the home to the American Academy. And everyone genuflects at that fountain. We all have been touched by it. And there's so many people. You guys are the ones who produced who? Three of the greatest black leaders of the 60s. You're talking about Malcolm, you're talking about Martin, and you're talking about Farrakhan, all within the same area and neighborhood. They were all there. Farrakhan's still alive. Farrakhan's still very much dealing with this. And despite what white America may say about Farrakhan, believe me, at the end of the day, just like with Malcolm, trust me, we'll all be genuflecting at the end in terms of him being a very worthy soldier who served us as a community well. Guaranteed, I guarantee you. So you need to get those stories now, is what I say.
Yeah, we'll come back to that point because I think welcoming the embrace does touch very well on that idea of making sure we capture our history. So maybe, Greg, I'll go to you next. I guess brilliance on the decision to make sure there were documentarians chronicling this journey because it gives us an opportunity to see this story as it actually developed and not only in the way some of the country received it. So has the documentary achieved what you set out for it to do?
I would say yes. You know, part of the work that we do at Embrace Boston is really around cultural representation. And, you know, this is the 5th film that we've done with We Want to Measure. And, you know, it's my favorite of all of them. And it's been front of mind to be able to document the things that we do, to be able to put out into the world the stories that are coming from our city. You know, and I think that the beautiful part about working with Beyond Measure is that they are artists in the highest sense of the word. Like they truly believe in telling the stories, and they're representatives of the neighborhoods that they've come from. They're true representatives of the city, and I think that it's the perfect marriage for us to be able to, you know, to tell our story, but use artists that are from the city and that are just as passionate about representing Boston as we are.
I have to ask you, why is this one your favorite?
Well, it was the easiest of them all, which is surprising.
I'm not sure the people behind the camera would totally agree.
And what I mean is the easiest in the sense that, you know, the first ones were learning each other, and the first one we did in the middle of the pandemic. So the way our working relationship started was I had just come on and we wanted to be able to celebrate Dr. King's birthday, but obviously at that time we weren't able to come together. So we were like, how can we reflect and do something worthy of them? And the first piece that we did was Voices on King. And that was really conversations with key figures in the community about the impact of Dr. and Mrs. King. So that was the very first start of it. And, you know, again, we're starting and learning, we're getting together and building from there. And each one has got access, you know, increasingly easy. And then along the way, we picked up NBC 10 as a partner. And, you know, we've been able to amplify and tell these stories. And it's like I said, now we're trying to figure out what the next move is going to be. And hopefully it'll be, you know, bigger and better than this one.
I have no doubts. All right, Noah, let me ask you, and forgive me, this might seem like slightly superficial of a question. All the voices in this film are so powerful, but they all look so darn good. And I wonder if there's some secret sauce in black filmmakers making films about black people that automatically you get this glow that comes through the camera lens.
I think one of the biggest things is being comfortable with your people, right? So not only, I mean, we look good, right? It gets us. It really just gravitates to what's nice to you, right? But seriously, being comfortable with those who look like you makes it easier to perform. So I think that is to our advantage of making those who are in front of the camera look good is because of who we look like and what we look like. And we don't carry, which I like, the same stigma of what Hollywood does on sets. And the roles sometimes, like we have a fairly laid back process so that everyone feels comfortable and that the best product is on the screen.
Right, because that comfort level, I imagine, is especially important in a documentary, because these aren't actors. You're asking people to talk to you from the heart. And it is hard to do that, looking down the barrel of the camera.
And there's times where we were looking at the camera and I was like, right. to stop because they were so comfortable.
Right.
And again, when I first put the film together, it was like an hour and a half. It was actually an hour and a half. What you saw was 45 minutes.
You will see the snagger cat
Eventually. I had to, Darrus and Miranda was like, okay, I laid this out. I need you guys to go for it. Chop it down. Let's really figure out what the story is because it could go so many ways. And I think we're going to have to do an extended cut for certain film festivals.
There's one more thing about it too. When you know what you're doing, as a crew, as a team, and knowing how to like people, knowing how to get proper makeup, you know what I mean? You actually know what you're doing.
I mean, the crew, listen, don't say in the back. Yeah, shout out to the crew. We have 3 techs on the team who are drone operators and videographers. We have Kat, who, don't mess with Kat, where is she actually? She's a DP as well. She knows her stuff like we know our stuff. And we have a ton of stories that we want to tell.
Okay, thank you. I should apologize because I did not introduce John, who is down here as well. John, he was going to do himself.
I'm a silent part.
Well, maybe John, we could start this question with you, but I'd like to get feedback from everybody on the panel, anybody who's willing to contribute to this, because I think the thing that stuck out for me personally watching this film, I've gotten a chance to see it twice now, is something that Catherine Morris said. She said, restoration of pride is a work in progress for people of color here, specifically Black people. I wonder what that statement means to you about the future of telling Black stories about Boston.
Well, the future is now. The future is always now. Tomorrow, the future will be tomorrow. So we always focused on stories that we can tell that are in the present and that can happen in the future. And that connects to our pride. That connects to our history. Our history is from all over the world, and it's here in Boston. Everything comes here in Boston. So there's so many stories, but understanding that historically we have Black people from all over the world, and they're all here, and the stories sit here, and all we have to do is extract it and tell it honorably. We have to respect it. We can't be disrespecting each other, right? We have to tell the story in a way where we honor each other. And then there's so many stories out there that we could do. Connecting to the lighting. Normally you can easily just throw 2-3 lights in the studio and put the camera there. It's gonna look decent. But then you have to take a step back and look at the people that you're lighting. You have to look at them and respect them and say, this is not how this person should look like. I should make this look better. And so that's the whole thing with storytelling. Everything is about respect.
Yeah. Well, the effort put into that part of the storytelling was obvious to me, and I think to many people who watched the film as well. Clennon, on the same point about pride, I have a feeling that's sort of what you were touching on a moment ago, that the stories about Boston are there, but there does seem to be a hesitancy to tell them. Is that also part of this process of restoring pride?
I don't know of any other city that's produced the leaders that you guys have, within a 3-year period. If you just look at 1951, 52, 53, you have 3 of the largest giants leading Black America. And they all came out of South End, not Roxbury, not Nubian Square, but they were South End. And I think that the Black community here needs to know where those places were. which is one of the reasons that I put together a 21 address map detailing the love story of Dr. King. That is, in terms of showing exactly where he and Coretta were, where they were. You know, the closest landmark, short of where they took that photograph that you saw, on that 21-page map, is where Coretta was scrubbing the floors in Beacon Hill as a maid. The Black community should know exactly where that address is. That's where she came out of. That's where she was before she came to South End and to Martin. You know, all we know about is 558. All we know about is the League of Women. No, you gotta know exactly the whole story. You gotta know where he pledged Alpha. You gotta know where they met. They didn't meet, with all due respect, they did not meet in 12th Baptist. That's not where they met. They met actually on Huntington in front of the conservatory. He picked her up. The point of the matter is we've got to know this story, you know, backwards and forwards. It is our story. It's not just a Bostonian story. It's Black America's story. And we got to know it. We got to know where all of these places were. Where he took her to have a meal, to where he took her to the symphony. All of these things we got to know. And so it's one of the reasons that I put together this map. This map will be on the website and of the festival, of the Roxbury Festival. But you guys should take a picture of that and know that this is basically your own walking tour. You can take it. And the resolution is going to be better, needless to say, on the internet when you look at it. But that's the reason. With today, we just unveiled one of the spots, and that spot was, and it'll be in the newspaper tomorrow and on the TV news tonight, we unveiled the newlywed home of Martin and Coretta. There was only one, and it was a block from where Bob the chef, is he called? Now Darrus kitchen or corner kitchen or whatever. It's right there. We unveiled it today. So there's a new marker where they lived. Bostonians have got to know this. They've got to own their history. Otherwise, we are in fact, our children are in fact, children we will never know, will be condemned to repeat this stuff. We've got to own it.
Glenn, if I can.
Sure.
Going back on the point around the restoration of pride, like, you know, growing up here, you know, I've had the privilege of traveling across the country, across the world, and hearing that age-old question of, are there Black people in Boston?
You're still here.
Still here is, you know, in a lot of ways was obviously, as you've seen, a thread that was weaved throughout the film, but it's something that we live. Like, it's really, it's difficult to grow up in a city that you love, that you celebrate, that you see. I see, you know, all of these beautiful people here from Boston who have done significant things in the city that hasn't been told on a national level. And when I hear from folks and say, you know, all they know about Boston is the sports teams, it's a little embarrassing. So I know that with this film and with the work that is being done to amplify the voices of our city, so much more can be done. And I do want to just acknowledge in our audience, Mayor Kim Janey is here. Who is literal walking Black history. And, you know, I've seen this film 50, 60 times, and I've never gotten emotional, but I heard sniffling behind me. And I was tell I was crying. I saw your tears too, but I just heard her crying, and it just meant so much to me. If y'all ever heard some mayoral tears, those are powerful tears, and that means a lot. Just from my experience, you know, growing up and being able to offer this back to the city, there's so many people who are doing incredible things just like this, and that's why it means so much to do a film like this and to be able to celebrate our people today.
Well, thanks for mentioning the emotions associated with this, because I imagine that's because it's a triumph that came through struggle. And I know that there was much resistance to the embrace growing up. For the filmmakers, how did you decide you were going to allow that topic to be covered in the film? Of course, we've heard people talk about it, but I seem to sense a responsibility not to make it bigger than it needed to be. Can you help me understand what that decision making was like from a story process?
Sorry. Before we answer that, 1 second, because I just want to get back on the restoration of property.
Oh, please do.
This is a very specific point, but whenever you restore something, if you're doing a restoration on a home or anything like that, you need money. You need to invest in it, right? And I think a big part of this restoration of pride that's happening in the city is that foundations like Embrace Boston are investing in Black-owned production companies, right? They're making an investment, and they're not doing it lightly. And I just don't want to gloss over that, right? Because what we do, the amazing crew of talented folk that we got together, one of our core values as a company is that everybody on set gets paid, right? Our kids can't necessarily afford to have unpaid internships like other people where they have, they can do all that work for no money. So for us, we're always saying everybody gets paid. It doesn't matter what you do, you get paid. And we can do that because of the investment that Embrace Boston has made in us. So I love talking about restoration of pride in the sense of what it feels like, what it looks like, but there's also an investment, a move that has to happen for that to happen. So I just wanted to put that out there. I also wanted to say thank you, Embrace, for just trusting in us. They let us be creative. We walked away from production for 2 to 3 years because we were being asked to do the same thing. There's a canned way of telling stories that people would hire us, and then they would want us to do that again and again. And we said, that's not what we're here for. We're here to really show our art and tell stories what we want to. Embrace hired us for Voices on King, which was shot here in the MFA, and Makiba McCary was here at the time, and Amari and Greg. I said, y'all just do you. To have that trust it brought us back.
Something new that
It brought us back.
Yeah. That we never had.
Yes.
It did bring us back.
It brought us back.
So you kind of gave us a little, nudge in the right direction.
Yeah.
So we appreciate that.
Yeah. So I
That's
just
the
wanted
point.
to
That's the whole idea, and it's great to hear y'all say that because that was really the idea, to be able to invest in artists and let them go. Like, if I'm over your shoulder nitpicking every single thing, then I'm probably hiring the wrong people. And I mean, that's more on me than it is on you. And I think that the more that people kind of, whether in a producer seat or whatever, they just have to understand that sometimes just let it go. And I think that's why this film is my favorite and why it's so beautiful to me, is because it's not a canned, like there is an easy way to have done this process. There's an easy way to make these kind of films, and I'm sure you've all seen them a million different times, and it's a great big pat on the back or whatever. There's about 15 things that probably would have gotten fired at any other space that are in this film, right? But I'm proud to say that from an organizational standpoint, that we were just allowed to go and just make something great. And then I just got out of the way. Hey, yeah, yes, no, 2 of those, 1 of those, and I'll talk to y'all next week. You know what I mean? And nobody was supposed to know that I was kind of that hands off, but it's out now.
So, real quick, to answer your question.
Yes. No. These are all of my questions getting answered.
It's more to do about structure, right? So, the Embrace is the main object that personifies everything. But you have to have the right structure to tell the story. So the history of Boston and the people are connected to that. And then we begin to build out of that slowly. So we're very disciplined about making sure that everything connects back. Every spoke, it's kind of like spokes on a wheel. Everything connects back. The Embrace is in the middle. And then the history of Boston is all over it. We just made sure that we're disciplined, asking a lot of hard questions with each other, making sure all of those things worked.
Understood. So if we think a little bit outside of Massachusetts and some other parts of the country, stories about Black people are censored, removed from libraries, not taught in syllabi. As filmmakers, to what extent are you concerned about that? I don't think it's in your backyard right now, but maybe it could be soon. For artists, what does that mean?
Have a bigger voice, and I think that for myself, there's so many different stories, especially the personal experience, our personal experiences, and the things that we go through on a daily. It may not correlate to that narrative that you've seen, right? That is always projected of, let's say, lower income neighborhood going through the gang or the drug journey and then coming out on top or not coming out on top, right? That's not every single story that every single Black person obviously goes through, right? And we want to talk about, as Mayor King James said, the joy that we have, the culture, the richness, the Nigerian stories that come out, Cape Verdean, Jamaican, everything, right? There's so many stories that are not being told, and if no one else is going to tell them, that was our biggest thing, is that we're going to tell those stories regardless. And I think the toughest thing is people supporting that, right? People giving us that platform to be like, all right, this story is out there. It's not what you're used to, but check it out. Because it's not what brings people to the theater sometimes, right? But as us as filmmakers, our journey and our goal is to bring that rich, unique, different story, and hopefully people will appreciate it.
I heard on the internet last week with respect to Michelle Obama's famous saying, when they go low, we go high. Well, when they go low, we're gonna get loud. And I think that's the key there. When we're being silenced, when we're being marginalized, when we're being, opportunities are being taken away from us, we're gonna figure out a way. And we're gonna be loud about it, we're gonna be intentional about it.
And I think film's a sneaky way of doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's open it up to some questions from the audience now. Is there a microphone up there? No, there's not?
I'm up.
Okay. Good, because that is what we're trying to do. Go ahead.
Hi, I loved both of your films, and it just was so inspiring. And speaking of inspiration, I'm just wondering, you said that this was 45 minutes and really it was an hour and a half. When you were making it, I know you had to make certain cuts and everything. With some of those cuts, were there any that made you say, you know what? That's a story that we're going to tell next. We're going to really flesh out that.
Yes. What can be resurrected from the cutting room floor?
Well, there was one that
No, Austin was.
There's so much.
Austin was our story. So Austin was the one that was sitting across. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Austin was the person who was sitting across from all of these interviewees and interviewing them, right? So in her memory and in her transcription process, she has everything. So why don't you answer on how that is?
So the question of what I didn't know about the possibility of Roxbury seceding from Boston in the late 1980s. I learned that by talking to Byron, and I called Noah and I said, "Did you know they almost left?" And he's like, "I did." So like stories like that, right? There are these moments across all of the interviewees, and I don't even know where to start. Like there could be Greg, there could be an entire part of P3.
You set up a whole cash in my back pocket.
But just there's so many. So the Roxbury secession. Mary Janie shared her experiences busing. I think sometimes we think about busing high schoolers, but first and second graders, right? What was that like? Folks that were Dark talked about, yes, we sent small black children, to Charlestown, but we sent some white kids. Just out to know what were these dynamics like. There were so many stories that can and should be told, and I'm just really excited that we have all the clips. I don't know what we're gonna do with them, but there's hours.
Keep them. All right, all the way in the back there, you have a question?
No, not a question. I just want to say to John and to Miranda and to the Embrace and to everybody down there that had a hand on this project. After watching this film, I'm more proud to be a black Cuban Bostonian from Roxbury.
Thank you for that comment. Right over here? Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's important for you guys to express or share what the production budget was in feature films, because as we talk about the need to invest, I think it would be helpful for people to get a sense of what that costs. So that's my question. What is
Did you guys hear your question?
You want me to answer that?
What?
Let me just say this to you. At the end of the day, I went to NYU's grad school of film for a year, and I was in for the 3-year program. The bottom line at the end of the day, what I took away and what I've taken away from my entire career is, there's one thing that's king. It's not necessarily lighting and all of that. It really isn't. Nobody ever sits there and sees a great film and says, what kind of camera was that? Or what kind of, nobody ever does that. There's one thing that's king. You were on camera. There's one thing that's king, and that's story. And if the story is in it, people will sit there all day long. Even if it's stick figures. They look for the story at the end of the day. So most of what you saw in my film, I think was shot. Yeah, I'm afraid so. On this cell phone, which many of you all have.
$500,000 is what it should have cost, or more, probably. But Greg and Embrace, they met us where we needed it to make it happen. And because it was an opportunity for us to really, as filmmakers, put our stamp on something that represents us, I mean, we would have done it for $15,000, $20,000,
Oh, word? Tell that story now. That was not how the budget meetings went.
I forgot he was here. That was all filmmakers.
I would have done it for that money.
Is there a camera in here?
All right, we better go to the next question here. Over here.
Forever, before they were even here. But to see the change coming makes my heart glad, because it's about time that when instead our voices, we use them. We are strong and be courageous. There's no need to fear, because fear is just it's just something there, or we have to ride over it. We can be afraid, but we have to still push through it. And I want to say that my question would be, how do we get our younger children, the younger ones, to be part of this learning of history in their syllabus, taking away the books that they get in school, that those books do not show us, they do not talk about the real story of us. How do we, right now, as my young people sit there, put this in elementary schools, in preschools, that they can learn from a young age the history that is for real, and not the history of somebody else's thought process that is pretty much, has a lot of difference.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I also wonder whether this medium is really accessible to school kids, because I do remember seeing other content about the Embrace that just seems so right for classrooms.
All I'll say is I teach at Boston Arts Academy. I know this is more effective. I know that this is more effective. It has to look cool. It has to sound cool. I understand that you can shoot on anything, but if it doesn't look good to them, they're not watching it, right? They're not going to watch it on the train. They're not going to watch it when they're walking home. They're not going to watch it when they're talking to their friends. They're not going to watch it when in the halls walking around. But if it's super engaging, then they start sharing it with each other, and that's how things go viral. And then they begin to learn. Obviously, we have to push it into the schools and promote it. But what really works the best is when they're sharing it and when they're excited about their story and how they believe in what's happening. They understand that they are part of the story. They're not separate from it. That's the most important thing.
I want to throw one more thing in there too. I think the other part that's super important is that there's multiple ways to get the job done. So the beautiful part about tonight, you have two films that are related subject matter, but two different approaches. And like you said, you shot it for what you did. This one's the budget that it is, but there's two different audiences to get people awake and aware and thinking about things that are outside of the space that we're talking about. You're talking about those stories are being taken away. Well, we have two groups of filmmakers that are really fighting back against that, and that's that counter-narrative work that's necessary. And I agree that there's a group of people that need it to look a certain way, it needs to approach it, it needs that way, but sometimes it is the rawness of the story and just sitting there and hearing somebody who's an engaging storyteller like in your film. So I think that there's multiple approaches, and that's the beautiful thing about the festival and the art as a whole. Like there's different ways to sing the song, but the key part is just make sure we're singing.
All right, we have time for one more. But I have 3 hands up. We'll take this woman here in the red shirt.
So I would like to address about representation being important. So like, how did you approach filling in like the gaps in stories and like maintaining their image, or like did you ever feel that there was a pressure to like match up to how the stories show Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King?
Yeah. I believe the question is how, when we were doing the story, did we find times where we had to like make the story meet the legacy of the Kings, and if it didn't, then what? Do I have that right? I would say actually the narrative, the use of a voiceover was a key part of ours, and we're like, the voiceover has to sound like a dude on the corner in Dudley. Like,
Whose voice was it, by the way?
Whose voice was it?
Marissa's back there.
Right there in the back. Shimali who's also known as DJ Real P, works at Northeastern, local influencer, culture creator, and we were like, we need that voice.
I can listen to that voice all day.
Yeah,
And
right?
one of the 150 most influential Bostonians this year, 2023.
Stand up. So
so having that voice guide us through the story helped us, as John was talking about the embracing Martin, but it's also Black Boston to our city, right? That's the love story. So we were telling you that, oh my goodness, we're not doing enough for the history, because this was all about showing love then, now, and in the future.
Clennon, Greg, Darrus, Miranda, John,